My happy place. Just suddenly, unexpectedly filmed an ad for Barnes & Noble. Well, not really an ad, but whatever. I guess I'll be on their story. That seems cool. Say hi to my brother. Thank you, Kirabot.
Bye-bye.
Just came back from Barnes & Noble. I'm getting ready for the books I read when I'm done writing, but I got these two. And very matchy-matchy and matchy-matchy, so. I have had a crazy wild day and just showered. That's why I'm currently a little soaked. But I've got a lot of writing done despite how much fun I've been having this week. which is great because I want to have fun, but I want to balance getting things done, but I never want it to be like just 100% just one or the other. I did get a lot of writing done. I am almost done with all of my structural edits. So I'm really bad at recapping these videos because in my head, they're an ongoing narrative. I've been working on what I call structural edits. They are scenes and chapters and even tiny moments in the story that structurally the foundation is cracked and I have to like rebuild it and rewrite it. For the most part, that means these chapters fall into two categories. They're either chapters where I believe that they could work better, or they were messy, or they were boring. I believe that, like, for me, just for my style and what I want to write, I want every scene or chapter to accomplish, well, technically, every scene and chapter should either move the narrative, reveal character, or present exposition, like explain something about the world, explain something about what's going on, and give a history of the characters. I would prefer if every scene and every chapter accomplishes more than one of those. Like, there should rarely be just one thing. I would rather they all intertwine. I feel like it does a lot more. So all the structural edits I've been making, they're either scenes where they didn't accomplish that, or they're just structurally, when you really think about it, it doesn't have a strong foundation. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. Those are the ones I have to rewrite. Or there were scenes that were fine, but I made changes to the world, the magic system, some of the character motivations and details, and even the backstory of some of the characters. And that causes the scenes and chapters where those are relevant to suddenly become either nonsensical or ineffective in some way. And in some cases, it's made some scenes and chapters actually, oh, you've made this a rule, or you've made this an aspect of this world. Oh, you connected these two characters. That this scene should actually be crazier because of what this implies. The implication should be much more obvious. So I've been working on all these structural edits since the start of these vlogs. And I have been working through a list, and I am almost through it all. For the most part, most of the list, the majority of it was Act 2, like the big middle chunk. I feel like that's pretty normal and common for most writers. I already focused on and worked on the pieces at the end, the climax in Act 3. I might go back and just for like a little something, but that might be my next pass. But Act 2 has been kicking my butt, and I finally am through most of it. I just have that one chapter that I skipped at the beginning of Act 2 because that was the one giving me the most trouble. And I said, I'll come back to it with clarity. And now I have it. Now I'm coming back to it knowing things that I was able to put later that I don't have to make that chapter do. It doesn't have to do as much work, so I can focus on the moment of what's happening with the characters. And that's really good because it makes the chapter smoother, and then I just don't want the chapter to be clunky. But the rest of the edits are actually in Act 1. Those are the ones that I have to go back. That is the act that technically was edited the most because it's the one I spent the most time on before actually focusing on drafting the whole book. But I have to go back, I have to check it, I have to make sure everything's totally consistent. And there's specifically 3 chapters, 3 scenes that I need to go back and work on. But yeah, I am worried about whether or not I'm becoming too methodical with these edits. That's something I need to check myself on. But I don't know. It's been so much going on. And as you can see, having a lot of fun. And I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop. I just want to keep writing, and I just want to keep working on this and then just get it out. That way I can finally sit back, look at it from a farther, broader perspective and start making like more focused, precise changes of language and tone and more parallels and just fine tune a lot. But showering and maybe regretting those tacos I had during happy hour, and hopefully I'll get to write some more before the Halloween extravaganza begins. There we go. Well, I guess I might
Tomorrow,
my brother, bring out a spell or two.
No, just dip down a wee bit.
Watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Right, I'm taking this one now.
I like the girls and do drugs.
Drugs and cigarettes in the back.
Okay, so yeah, I had a lot of fun. I am basically done with Act 2. I finally wrote that chapter, and it's surprising that when I came back to it, it felt mostly the same. Like it felt like what I had written before was fine enough. It was just missing an emotional beat to it. So I found myself technically writing the same thing. It was the language that had to change. And it's like the scene where the characters, they've arrived in a city that two of them lived in. It's funny, I've said this before because it happens twice. It's just an overlap of who lives in what city. It's the first time that two of them have been outside of one place for 4 years. And I feel like I nailed the initial reaction and feeling of, wow, we're out. Oh, wow, look around us. And, ooh, look what's changed. But I needed to go back and change the language and then write with a more forward momentum of that chapter. So structurally, it stayed the same. Even though there's a structural edit, structurally, this stayed the same until the very end, which was I wanted to bring the characters in a specific direction so that I could get a buildup of their wonder and awe disappearing, being replaced by a sense of rising dread, only to be confronted with the actual sight of something that is the source of the dread. And that was what that chapter was missing. That should have been the focus. The focus of the chapter should have been that, is they now are standing in a spot where they have an outside perspective of the thing that is causing them all of their stress and anxiety and fear. They see it with their own eyes. That is what was missing. And I don't know what I was thinking the first time. I think when I first wrote this chapter, and then even in the subsequent rewrites of it, I was trying to make the chapter do so much. I thought of it as an exposition chapter, which I never want to think of a chapter as that. Like, oh, that just sounds so, it just sounds like a drag. So I had to go back and I had to give that chapter just a little TLC, rewriting it for the perspective of this should be a really powerful emotional beat. It's not just a reintroduction from these characters into a world. It's the first time introduction for the reader into this particular aspect of the world. But the focus should be on moments of change. The world is changing whether or not you're there to witness it. The change is something kind of awful. And that makes the characters more anxious and makes what they're trying to do even more important. And I had that one character who's not as involved, who didn't live in that weird space for 4 years, who isn't awed by everything. So for her, she's like, I have never even been here. Everything's new to me. It's like who's more surprised when they see an alien floating in the kitchen? The baby or the adult? You know, for the baby, it's like everything's new. For the adult, it's like, no. I've been on this planet for 42 years, and now there's aliens? I needed to add a stronger emotional beat, and I needed to create an actual focal point for the chapter. I think for most of the chapters I've written and rewritten, there's a focal point where it's like, this is what I want to be the catalyst for the characters to feel things about, to react to trigger them into a certain place, or I'd rather say activate rather than trigger. It activates them. And I like having that one strong, powerful emotional beat, with a few exceptions of where I may have a counter beat that switches a mood, which I actually did in a recent chapter, which is, that was one of the last chapters I ended up editing for the structural edits, and I'm so glad it came out the way it did, because I just really, I love the idea of a balance between finding beauty in despair and despair in beauty, and there's something about that contradicting juxtaposition of just, I don't know. The best example I can think of, just to illustrate the point, is if any of you have seen or played Final Fantasy X, and the character who her job, her people, is also the evil, as the two candidates were trying to, but this is an evil that will not go away. It's always going to come back. So the entire world is just baked for the culture baked into this deep dish of expecting a lifetime, eternity, for generations after, of grief, of loss, and sorrow that will be able to and the character himself to get to the her job is that when people are killed by this thing, is that she has to send their souls to the afterlife. It's a ritual, culture, and party of dancing. And it's just a beautiful shot of her standing on water, she's walking on water, standing on water, of the waves of those guys, as people already, they never leave the dead, they never she's standing on the face of water, she's dancing, her gems sends their souls to an afterlife. Because she doesn't do this, their souls, it's like there's and actually almost that. And it's just like really beautiful for the main character who doesn't know what's going on, he's watching, and she realizes, oh, this is basically a mass funeral. Everyone around is crying and grieving, and she was beautiful, elegant, she's dancing, and tears are literally rising out of the water, going to the afterlife. And he's like, people keep dying, and he keeps dancing. That's beauty and horror. Just, I'm tired. I danced too much. I didn't know you could get that tired from dancing. And it was a much warmer Halloween than it should have been. And I am sweaty because I decided to wear a costume with layers. And I'm going to think about that. The beauty and the horror. Like having a great time at a club and the bathroom is the horror, but the dancing is the beauty. Yeah. But hopefully I get to write more tomorrow. And that is the end of this. Happy Halloween. Hi. I came all the way from Florida to Philadelphia specifically to come to this store so that Blue can convince me to buy this book.
I'm also a
That's a wrap.
Floridian.